Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be with you and good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming on this cold evening to this lovely area here in London. Brief introduction about myself. I was a volunteer here at Stop Trafficking Worldwide, helped do a lot of leafleting, doing a lot of events over the past 3 years. But I'm also an aviator, an engineer, project manager, outdoor enthusiast, but most of all, I'm a human being and a Muslim. That is my faith. But I'm here to briefly discuss the kind of systems that we work around all day, things that we rely on all day, and the airports, the transport that we use, the technology we use, are the same systems that traffickers also use to exploit and move people, and to exploit them. So, bit of an example here. When I'm flying high, 5,000, 10,000 feet, I look at the bigger picture. I don't look like, okay, what's that person doing down there? Is he enjoying his croissant? No. Or was that person, is he enslaved or anything? No. The bigger picture is, I am taught to look at big cities, big roads, find what is there, and that is my goal at the end of the day. But that is the same kind of mindset that we have nowadays here when we're walking on the street. We look down and we walk straight. We don't see the little details around us. We forget the small things that are happening, and that is our situational awareness is a little bit out of touch. And that's what we need to do and look after and improve every day that we can. Because unfortunately, human trafficking isn't just underground. It's not always hidden. It's open in plain sight. We just don't know where it is. And that's the reason that we naturally don't look. We just want to look around. So it's good to improve our situational awareness when we can. And I'm sure we're going to hear a lot of statistics around today, but just the biggest statistics that we can focus on is that around the world, globally, there's 50 million slaves in modern-day slavery. And we use that term modern-day slavery, not just human trafficking, but modern-day slavery, because there's the act, and there's the means, and there's the purpose. There's the three ways that someone becomes a slave, and the first part of that is the human trafficking part, which unfortunately is one of the most dangerous parts, and the ones that we can really not find very well. Of that 50 million, 27 million of them is forced labour. So majority is in construction, building, that sort of stuff around the world. It could be mining, happening a lot in Africa. And there was a big story about what's happening obviously in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where there's children as young as 7 who are working in these very dangerous mines in very harsh conditions, just so they can make $1 a day. In that country, unfortunately, that is a good payment. But it's the systems that we're trying to focus on today that we sometimes use and we trust, and we think they can't be accountable, they can't be responsible. It's the transport, the housing thing. In this country as well, housing agencies can be responsible. The workplaces, the supply chains. There was a big event we did here all about the supply chains and how they are compliant with human trafficking all around the world. Migration routes, which Sheikh mentioned, was about conflict. That's also, from a distance, we don't look at this because it doesn't affect us. Initially, we don't look at it, but that's where we need to be looking more deeply into. Recently, I had the pleasure of attending an event in the House of Parliament two weeks ago. It was focused particularly on one form of modern slavery. It was bonded labour, particularly that in brick kilns, where they get the clay and the brick and then they bake them in the sun and then take them to the ovens and so on. But unfortunately, what's happening is the workers who are working there, they are working in very harsh conditions, but they're not paid a daily wage and they don't go home to their family. They are stuck in there by bonded labour. Bonded labour is they are forced to pay off a debt, and that debt they're often kind of coerced into. Maybe they have to pay off debt. They have to pay off a medical bill that they weren't expecting, and children they bring their families to pay these debts. But unfortunately, with interest and whoever sets the debt amount, that debt never gets paid off, and children who aren't going to school, 5, 6, 7-year-old kids, there's pictures all over online, are working in these brick kilns. And that's the most easily seeable modern day slavery or human trafficking that we can see out there. It's something that we can access and that's easily, shall we say, amendable. We can fix it ourselves, but there's many out there that we can't fix, such as women and children who are being exploited, which is so hidden in sometimes the higher classes of our environment that we really don't know. So from an aviation point of view, looking down, we have to look sometimes more into the detail rather than the bigger picture. And maybe from a more systems and technical point of view, we see slavery as adopted. Back in the day when there was no technology, everything was done cash in hand, gold, simple, easy. Nowadays, it's very complicated. Everything's online, everything's banking. We have encrypted messages that are being used to sell children online, on Instagram, on Facebook, that sort of stuff. GPS tracking, fake documents is even worse. Financial systems are getting even worse. And this technology that was actually designed to improve and make our lives easy is now being used to exploit people. And that's what we really need to work out. And the final one of the other things which I say I'm quite enthusiastic about is the outdoors. The outdoors is there, to be free and to explore, to, where a place you go for sanctuary. But unfortunately, freedom of movement for a lot of people is restricted severely. Refugee routes, conflict zones, camps, remote areas, and some of these are the highest risk places. So what we see as a sanctuary for some is not for others. And when war breaks out, we've got a lovely organisation, lady here from an organisation called Beyond Conflict. Ukraine, Gaza, Sudan, Syria, when this conflict happens, we have major issues. There's the whole infrastructure for support out the window. This is when the traffickers walk in the door and they say, it's free reign, no one's even caring, looking after what we're doing. So, politically, the world is under pressure, conflictly, everything's happening. But then now the final thing is what we can do about it, because we can constantly talk about issues without not always talking about a solution. So the first and most important thing is, it's everyone's moral responsibility to do something about it. Not essentially send lots of money to this organisation and let them deal with it. That's not how we should think. We are also accountable, even for the smallest things, because we must know the signs and how to spot it. We must raise awareness in all of its forms here around the UK and globally. We must not just ourselves, but use the knowledge we have, educate others, and always push for accountability from the big corporations to the small charities, to the governments, to anyone who uses the services, to pull back and say, look at what you're doing and try and work forward from there. Freedom is a right that is given by God. It is a right that is done by international law, and we must work to make sure it is upheld. Thank you very much, guys.